rights for land, you cannot restore agriculture. I spent 30 years of my life in the cattle industry. I started work in the cattle industry when I was 17, and I know the cattle industry backwards. We don't have a cattle industry anymore. Why? Because there's no security of tenure. And if you don't tackle that issue, let me tell you, we're going nowhere. On the urban side, we are well ahead of the game because we're giving title now to all urban housing. And that process is beginning in the 1st of January next year, and will cover the entire country. And we're going to issue something like 4.1 million title deeds in the next 5 years. And that'll create property worth hundreds of billions of dollars, which it can be used as collateral for financing. On the question of how do we get access to long-term financing, I've just had a fascinating week in Morocco. I'd never heard of this meeting called the Africa Investment Forum. And one of the projects that I'm behind is the Kariba Solar Project, where we're putting 1,000 megawatts of solar panels. That's about 2.5 million solar panels on Kariba, on a floating platform, to generate solar so that we can turn off the turbines during the day and use them during the night, and we'll augment the hydro capacity of Kariba with solar. And we took that project to Morocco, to this meeting. And behind our approach are 105 companies who consume about 50% of the power in Zimbabwe. So this is all the big boys, Zimplats, Unki, etc. They got together, we formed an association. And this association basically said, if you produce power, we will buy it. We will buy it in US dollars, and we will pay a market price. And on the strength of that undertaking by these 105 companies, we were able to raise the funding for that project, long-term funding, concessional interest rates on the international market. And when we took that project to the financiers, there were 40 international banks at that meeting. When we put it on the table with those guys, the fact that this was the private sector with strong balance sheets wanting to come into the game and borrow the money, it blew them away. It blew them away. We raised $100 million for the Glass Block Dam at the same meeting. Again, it was really so easy, I was astounded. People out there want to lend us money. They are prepared to lend you money on a long-term basis for viable projects on which they are guaranteed to be paid back on time and in full and in US dollars. And if you can meet those criteria, believe me, you can work the international market. The average cost of money which is borrowed by Zimplats today is just over 2%. That's the international standard of borrowing. Why? Because they pass all their export proceeds through Mauritius, and from Mauritius they pay their external financiers the interest and other charges which are due. If you get money at 2% over 15 years, you can do anything. That's how China has developed. China did not develop on self-generated funds. They borrowed this stuff. China has a national debt of 250% of GDP. Our national debt is 29% of GDP. And they talk about us being over-borrowed. We're the most under-borrowed state in the damn world. But China gets their money at 1.5 or 2%. Swiss ambassador told me the other day, he said, Eddie, I've got two illustrations of this to just tell you. The first was from the Swiss ambassador. Swiss ambassador said, Eddie, we don't have any foreign aid for you in Zimbabwe because we don't get in that game. What we've got is money, trillions of dollars of money. And we don't know what to do with this stuff. We no longer pay interest on it. If you want to put your money with us, you've got to pay us to keep your money. So a guy in Zurich lends the Chinese $1 billion over 5 years at 1% or 2% interest. And on a Monday morning, his computer dings and $1 billion arrived with interest on time, on due date. And this guy looks at this and he says, what a fantastic client. Now, what am I going to do with $1 billion in Zurich? So he picks up the phone and he phones China and he says, do you want it back? The second illustration I want to give you, when I was a member of the Reserve Bank board in Harare, I wasn't a member for long because they fired me because I was so outspoken. I took out to lunch the governor of the Bank of China. Now here's one of the most important bankers in the world. What a delightful gentleman. Tall Chinese gentleman. Fantastic guy. We had a marvelous lunch together. And he said to me, Eddie, the international market for funds, for finance, is a game. And in this game, you're either players or you're spectators. We in China, like all the other countries of the world who are in the game and playing on the field, do so by the rules. If you don't play by the rules, you're a spectator. And that's what you are in Zimbabwe. You're a spectator. And if you're a spectator, you have to pay for your seat. If you're a player, you get paid to play. That's why we've got to play the game by the rules. And what I want to say to CZI this morning is, if you guys got together, your top businessmen, and you work together to look for money for retooling, and we've got to retool. I was talking the other day to a spinner up in Glendale in Harare. He's got 4 spinning factories. 3 of them are equipped with equipment which was bought second-hand before independence. The last one, he has a brand new spinning factory with equipment from Switzerland. The demand for that product is so great that people in East Africa are sending trucks to Glendale to pick up the product, and they're prepared to pay a premium. We are an industrial museum. There's no way. I was a director of G&D Shoes in Bulawayo. Our productivity was 1.5 pairs of shoes a day. Chinese productivity is 12. You can't compete with these guys unless you've got modern factories with modern equipment. And to do that, you've got to have money, and you've got to have cheap money. And if the government can't provide us with that solution, then let's create the solution ourselves. At the meeting in Morocco, we raised $1.5 billion for Zimbabwe. 4 businessmen from Zimbabwe. $1.5 billion. Long-term money at low interest rates. If we work together, and if we combine our strengths, believe me, we can make things move. One of those projects was the recapitalization of the railways. We raised $700 million from the African Development Bank for that project. And Bulawayo will be one of the major beneficiaries. Guys, get off your bums. Stop relying on government.
Thank you so much, Eddie, for that.